Good evening, and welcome. Tonight, we descend. We descend not into crypts, though our minds may wander there, but into the deepest layers of human storytelling, into the primal imagery that has haunted and guided us for millennia. Our guide on this journey? The skeleton. Not merely the biological scaffold, the silent architect of our form, but the skeleton as a cultural and psychic phenomenon, a symbol so potent, so universally recognized, that it transcends time and continent. It is the great memento mori, but also so much more: a warrior, a guardian, a philosopher, and a gatekeeper. We will explore why these dry bones refuse to rest, why they rise from grave and page, to dance, to warn, to judge, and to terrify. We will follow them as they tread the thin veil between worlds, serve as vessels for unspeakable power, become emblems of time itself, and enact terrible curses on those who dare disturb their slumber. Furthermore, we will delve into their role as keepers of memory, their paradoxical life in comedy and festival, and their chilling utility as artifacts of dark power. Part 1. The Skeleton as Undead. Why bones rise from the grave. Let us begin with the most visceral image: the walking skeleton. From the rattling legions of Jason and the Argonauts to the pixelated hordes of fantasy games, the animated skeleton is a staple of the undead. But why bones? Why not just a ghost, a vaporous specter? The answer lies in profound contradiction and deep-seated dread. A ghost is spirit without matter. A zombie or revenant is corrupted flesh, a denial of decay. But the skeleton is matter stripped utterly of its spirit, the absolute, clean finality of death. It is the end product of decay. To see it move is to witness a logical impossibility, a reversal of the natural order so complete it bypasses horror and enters the realm of profound, cosmic wrongness. The flesh has fallen away. The narrative should be over. Yet it walks. This is why it chills us to the marrow. It represents a death so absolute it has become animate. A paradox, give him legs. In global mythology, this animation often requires no complex explanation. It is a given of a magical world. In Slavic folklore, Koschei the Deathless, though often depicted as a living sorcerer, holds his soul separate from his body, in a needle, in an egg, in a duck, a concept echoing the terrifying detachment of consciousness from bone. More directly, tales from across Europe speak of churchyard bones reassembling on Walpurgis night or the eve of All Souls, often to finish an unresolved earthly task, to protest a sacrilege, or simply to hold a spectral danse macabre of their own. In Japanese folklore, the Gashadokuro, giant skeletal yokai formed from the accumulated anger and bones of those who died of starvation, roam after midnight, snapping off the heads of the living with their teeth. Here, the skeleton is not just an individual, but a collective, a conglomerate injustice given monstrous form. The psychological power is in the simplicity and universality. The skeleton is a memento mori that has gotten up to deliver its message personally. It is our own future, animated to chase us in the present. It speaks to a fear not just of death, but of death's agency, that the final, indifferent remains could harbor intention, malice, or mockery. It is death's bureaucracy made efficient. No softness, no pleading, just the relentless, rattling execution of an impersonal will. Part 2. The Skeleton as Psychopomp, conductor between the dead and the living. But the skeleton is not merely a menace. In its neutrality lies another, more venerable function, that of the psychopomp, the conductor of souls. Here, the skeleton sheds its malevolence and becomes a guide, albeit a stern one, because it itself is perfectly at home in both realms. It is the ultimate immigrant and emigrant, fluent in the languages of both life and oblivion. Consider the ancient Egyptian worldview. The god Osiris, lord of the underworld and resurrection, is often depicted in a tightly wrapped mummy form. but his iconography is essentially that of an articulated, sovereign corpse. To pass into his realm, one's heart was weighed against the feather of Ma'at. The skeleton, in a sense, is the ultimate truth beneath that heart. It cannot be lied to with fair skin, fine clothes, or a silver tongue. It is the unadorned evidence of a life lived. In Mesoamerican cultures, this role is explicit and deeply integrated into cosmology. Mictecatzihuatl, the Aztec queen of Mictlan, the underworld, is consistently depicted as a flayed body or a grinning skull. She presides over the dead not as a monster, but as a sovereign. The Days of the Dead celebrate this connection, where skulls, calaveras, of sugar and marigold petals, cempasúchil, are not terrifying, but welcoming, a fragrant, colorful bridge for ancestors to visit. The skeleton here is a celebrant, a host at the great feast that links the generations. In shamanic traditions worldwide, from Siberia to the Amazon, the initiate's symbolic dismemberment and reduction to a skeleton is a common motif, a necessary death of the old self to be reborn with visionary power. The bones are the indestructible core, the seed of identity, from which new life can be woven. The skeleton, therefore, becomes a map and a passport. It is the fundamental architecture that remains when all else is burned away, making it the perfect entity to navigate the non-linear landscapes of the afterlife, which are themselves often reflections of an interior, archetypal architecture. It is death, but death as a necessary transition, a stern midwife for the soul. As the silent ferryman Charon evolved in medieval art to be depicted as a skeletal figure, he demands his obol not out of greed, but as the keeper of an irrevocable law. The skeleton psychopomp enforces the boundary. It says, "This far and no further to the living," and "Come, this is the way to the newly dead." It is the border guard of the great beyond, impartial and unmoved by tears or bribes. Part 3. How bones become demons. Rituals of animation. What of the deliberate act, the forced animation? This is where the skeleton transitions from archetype to instrument and enters the dark realm of ritual magic and forbidden science. Here, bones are not rising on their own accord, but are being grafted into service, their neutrality violated to serve a mortal's will. Necromancy, in its classical sense, was often about divination, calling up the spirit of the deceased to gain knowledge. But the popular imagination, fed by grimoires and folklore, envisioned something more tangible and militarily useful, the raising of the physical body or its bones as a servant or guardian. Rituals for such feats, like those hinted at in the Picatrix or the apocryphal Necronomicon, share common, grim elements. A locus of death, crossroads, gallows, battlefield, specific astrological timing, midnight, Saturn's hour, a lunar eclipse, and potent transgressive materials, graveyard dirt, mandrake, virgin's blood, and of course, the bones themselves, preferably from a suicide or an unbaptized child. The process is one of blasphemous reverse creation. In many creation myths, the gods fashion humans from clay or dust around bones or stones. The necromancer seeks to replicate this demiurgic act, but without the divine spark of anima. Instead, they implant a shard of their own will or bind a demonic force, an elemental, or a suffering spirit into the osseous framework. The bone becomes a vessel, a suit of armor for a non-human intelligence, or a prison for a human one. This is the skeleton as demon in the truest sense, a spiritual entity given a physical, enduring, and obedient form. The bone, having once housed a human soul, is now uniquely suited and cursed to house another, darker tenant. Folklore is replete with simpler yet equally terrifying versions. Beyond the Jewish golem of clay, Eastern European tales speak of sorcerers assembling homunculi from bone marrow, mandrake roots, and stolen breath. In parts of Africa, legends tell of witches who use bone fragments in zombie rituals, to create mindless laborers. The bone demon is a slave, a warrior, or a guardian, utterly obedient and terrifyingly durable. For what sword can truly kill that which is already dead? It can only be unmade by breaking the ritual bond, often by finding and destroying the specific bone or inscribed parchment that acts as its anchor, its heart. This turns the hunt for the monster into a grim archaeological puzzle. Part 4. The skeleton as demon of time. Death as a bony spirit. Now we come to perhaps its most powerful metaphorical guise, the skeleton as time itself. This is where the archetype merges with natural philosophy and existential dread. Why is death personified as the Grim Reaper, a robed figure with a scythe and a skeletal face, and not as a rotting corpse? The answer is abstraction. The skeleton is the ultimate clean result of time's patient work on the body. It is erosion made manifest, the slow subtraction of all that is soft and temporary. The Reaper does not just bring death, he is the living harvest of time. The scythe cuts down lives in their season, and the skeleton beneath the robe is the hidden truth, the bare, timeless structure that remains when the season is over. It is time's signature. The late medieval period, ravaged by the Black Death, gave us the most profound and democratic expression of this, the danse macabre. In murals stretching from Paris to Tallinn, in poems and plays, a skeletal death, often merry or sardonic, leads emperors, popes, merchants, peasants, and beautiful maidens in a final, equalizing dance. Here, the skeleton is not a mindless horror, but a witty, ironic, and relentless maestro. It mocks worldly power and vanity, for before the bone, all temporal status is revealed as a temporary costume. The dance is time's parade, and everyone is conscripted. This skeleton is a moralist, a preacher in bony form. It is the demon of Chronos, linear, devouring time, as opposed to Kairos, the opportune moment. It reminds us that our time is finite, measured, and its end is written in our very structure. Every hour brings us closer to becoming it. In Albrecht Dürer's masterful engraving, Night, Death, and the Devil, the skeletal death, pallid and crowned with snakes, holds an hourglass beside the steadfast night. The sands are running, the fact is presented with chilling clarity, but the night's duty remains. The skeleton here is not an attacker, but a companion, a constant, silent witness to our mortal journey, the ever-present escort on the road. Part 5. Cursed Bones. Legends of disturbed slumber. If the skeleton is a boundary marker between the sacred realm of the dead and the profane world of the living, what terrible fate awaits those who vandalize that boundary? The global lore of cursed bones is a universal ethical code, written not in ink, but in fear and preserved in cautionary tales. These stories follow a powerful, recurring pattern. A tomb is robbed for gold, a sacred burial mound is plowed for farmland, a warrior's skull is taken as a drinking cup or trophy, or a frugal or sacrilegious builder uses pilfered human bones as cheap mortar for a new bridge or church. The violation is always one of profound disrespect and utilitarian arrogance, treating the sacred, singular remnant as mere matter, as raw material. The curses that follow are poetically resonant, often mirroring the crime. The violator may be haunted by the relentless, dry rattling of bones only they can hear, a sound that erodes sleep and sanity. They may be afflicted with a wasting disease that literally consumes their flesh, leaving them closer to the skeletal state of the one they defiled. Often the bones themselves seek restitution through sympathetic magic. A stolen femur causes the thief's leg to wither and blacken. A pilfered skull whispers unbearable truths or prophecies of doom until the listener perishes. In British and Scandinavian folklore, disturbing ancient barrows often released a barrow-wight, a malevolent spirit guardian often described as gaunt, bony, and cloaked in darkness, fiercely possessive of its grave goods. In Norse sagas, the Draugr, the undead inhabitants of burial mounds, guard their treasure with supernatural strength, shape-shifting powers, and a palpable, chilling hatred for the warmth of the living. These are not mere ghosts. They are the physical grave and its contents, personified and enraged. The profound lesson in these tales is the concept of sacred inertness. The bones are not just objects, they are the inalienable property of death and memory. Death holds a copyright that expires never. To use them for a trivial, worldly purpose, be it for art, magic, or construction, is to commit a profound category error, to invite a backlash from the very order of the universe. The curse is the ecosystem of meaning reasserting its balance. The bones must be returned with apology and ceremony, where the violator must join them to restore the peace of the threshold. Part 6. The skeleton as vessel and relic. Bones of power. Beyond curses and demons, bones have also been sought as conduits of sacred power in a context far removed from necromancy. The veneration of relics. This is the skeleton sanctified, not vilified. In medieval Christianity, the bones of saints, a finger, a skull, an entire skeleton encased in jewels and finery, were believed to be permeated with holy virtue, acting as antennas for prayer and sources of miracles. The cathedral in Cologne houses the purported bones of the three magi. Countless churches claim fragments of the true cross or the bones of apostles. This practice, while seemingly opposite to the fear of animated bones, shares a foundational belief that the bone retains a connection to the essence of the being it once supported. It is a point of contact between the mundane and the divine, a physical anchor for grace. The careful, often lavish display of these skeletons, the Katakombenheiligen of Switzerland and Germany are stunning examples, seeks to honor this connection, transforming the skeleton from a symbol of mortality into one of eternal life and intercessory power. It is the ultimate redemption of the bone, from a symbol of decay to a beacon of salvation. Part 7. The Laughing Skull. Carnival, Comedy, and the Comic. Memento Mori. Finally, we must acknowledge the skeleton's role in comedy and carnival, its grin taking on a different tone. From the gestures of the Danse Macabre to the slapstick skeletons of Mexican calaca figurines and the pixelated enemies of medieval, the skeleton can be a figure of levity. This is the comic Memento Mori. In the context of festival, like Mexico's Dia de Muertos or other carnival traditions, the skeleton's ubiquity serves to domesticate death, to make it familiar and thus less terrifying. By painting our faces as skulls, dancing with bone figurines, and writing witty poems, calaveras literarias, from death's perspective, we engage in a cultural psychodrama. We laugh at the skeleton, and thus, for a moment, we laugh at our own mortality. This is not disrespect, but a profound form of coping, a way to stare into the void and make a funny face back. The laughing skull reminds us that while death is inevitable, dread is optional. It is the Psyche's brilliant maneuver to rob the archetype of some of its terror through satire and celebration. Conclusion. The architecture of fear and meaning. So, what have we found in the bone chamber? We have found that the skeleton is far more than a Halloween prop or a biological diagram. It is a multifaceted, universal symbol, an empty canvas upon which we project our deepest fears, hopes, and questions about existence. As undead, it represents the horror of reversed natural law and death's unwelcome agency. As psychopomp, it is the neutral, truthful guide between the states of being, the border guard of eternity. As demon vessel, it is a tool of forbidden will, a perversion of creation through blasphemous ritual. As time's demon, it is the great equalizer, the moral philosopher of our finitude, and the witness to our journey. As cursed object, it is the guardian of sacred rest and the ruthless enforcer of cosmic respect. As holy relic, it is a sanctified bridge to the divine, a vessel of grace. As comic icon, it is a tool for cultural catharsis, allowing us to mock the reaper and soften the terror of the inevitable. It persists in our stories because it is, quite literally, the framework of our being. It is the last thing to go, and therefore, in the imagination, the thing that can last forever, carrying identity beyond the flesh. It is the white, hard truth beneath the soft, colored lies of life. It is the ship that can sail the seas of death because it is made of the shoreline of both worlds. The next time you see its grinning visage, in a museum, on a screen, in a festival, do not just see a threat. See a question. See a boundary. See a mirror, a guide, a witness, and a teacher. It asks us not merely, "Are you afraid?" but, "How will you live, knowing that I am your foundation and your fate?" In that question, in that silent rattle, lies not just terror, but the seed of all philosophy, all art, all love, and all meaning wrestled from the jaws of eternity. The skeleton, therefore, in its beautiful, terrible paradox, is not just a figure of death. It is, ultimately, the figure that makes life matter. Thank you.